We're going to start in about 30 seconds, so please, everyone, take your seats, get comfortable. And I want to share a few stats with you. At least 730 million people around the world experience hunger. 2.6 billion people cannot afford access to a healthy diet. And non-communicable diseases, including diet-related illnesses such as heart disease, diabetes, and cancer, are responsible for roughly 70% of deaths globally each year. At the same time, farmers, fishers, food workers, and communities are facing the growing impacts of the climate crisis, conflict, and inequality. It's also important, I think, in this moment, and especially today, to acknowledge that across the United States, many communities are experiencing fear and uncertainty related to ICE. The relations and trust that help all of our communities thrive are being strained. We should not be killing poets, and we should not be killing nurses. We need to speak up and stand up for one another. And I urge you all to reach out to your Congress members and your local lawmakers to tell them how you feel about this erosion of democracy. And you know, this is really what I have on my mind as I watch the film Food 2050, because it reminds us that the challenges are immense, but solutions are not only possible, they're being built every day. We have to support and celebrate the incredible diversity of people, innovations, practices, and knowledge that are driving that work forward. So I want to thank the Rockefeller Foundation, especially Sarah Farley and Roy Steiner, for believing in the power of storytelling, and especially hopeful storytelling during these times. So I want to thank the organizations behind the top 10 visions that are in the film Food 2050 for their leadership and their courage. So I'm going to list them all. The Sikangu Community Development Corporation, the Nandi Foundation, the Food Safety and Standards Authority of India, India's Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, Dark Poor Media Africa, the Good Food Fund of the China Biodiversity Conservation and Green Development Foundation, the Natural Systems Agricultural Laboratory at the University of Manitoba, the International Potato Center, one of my favorites, Wageningen University, the African Population and Research Center, and the Stone Barns Center for Food and Agriculture. Give them a round of applause, please. And I want to thank the team at Media Red, especially Tom Leach, Andrew York, and Matthew Thompson, for making sure that the story of these champions, these visionaries, were told during very difficult times. So we're going to have two short discussions, one before the screening and one after, which will feature some of the people featured in the film as well as the people behind the film. And we hope you'll connect and continue to have these conversations using the hashtag Food2050. So I'm now excited to turn to our first discussion as I welcome to the stage Xiye Bastida, who is a Mexican climate activist, the executive director of the Re-Earth Initiative, and a member of the Indigenous Otomi community. Give her a round of applause. I'm so glad to see you again, Xiye. It's been a long time.
Likewise. Hello, everyone.
So I want you to talk, if you can start by talking a little bit about the power of storytelling for indigenous foods and why that's so important.
Well, thank you so much, and I'm really excited for all of us to see the film. I actually got a preview of it a little bit, so I'm gonna add things that I give you no spoilers because I think it's like really incredible to see it. And I think as an indigenous, coming from an indigenous upbringing, stories are the basis of our culture, our traditions, our dreams, our stories, where we come from, who we are, the thing that guides our identity. And what happens with the climate crisis is that if the foundation of our stories is different, if the ecosystem is different, then we don't have really the environment that makes sense for our stories. Does that make sense? Like if you grow up with a story about how the seasons go, and then the seasons are not the same anymore, then your story, your identity starts to erode. So that for me is one of the main things about the climate crisis. It's robbing us of our identity and our culture, which in a way is very dangerous because our values are about reciprocity with Mother Earth. So if we don't have the foundation to enact that reciprocity, then we lose so much of the climate solutions that are so vital. And I'm going to share a story with you about why in Mexico corn, maize, is so vital and important for us. We see ourselves as our bodies, our skin being made of corn. We see ourselves as corn people. And it's a crop that has been harvested in Mexico and in Mesoamerica for more than 7,000 years that we know of. There's a story that goes that, has everybody heard about Quetzalcoatl? Quetzalcoatl is the god that would turn into kind of like a serpent with feathers. And there's a pyramid of Quetzalcoatl in Teotihuacan. So there's a pyramid of the moon, of the sun, and Quetzalcoatl. And Quetzalcoatl was a god that was very smart. And when the Aztecs didn't have any crop that would sustain them and the growing population, the gods were trying to figure out a way to get food for people. And there was a myth that there was corn, seeds of corn, behind some mountains that were impenetrable. Some gods tried to, split the mountain in two, tried to do everything that they could to get across, and nobody could because they were trying to use like big power. And Quetzalcoatl turned himself into a little black ant and decided that he was going to cross the mountain as a little black ant, make it to the other side, and brought to civilization for the first time to the Aztecs the seed of corn that turned the story around and made it so that it was one of the most thriving civilizations of its time, with an estimated population of over 200,000 people that grew from just a few people that arrived to the Valley of Mexico. And so that story for me not only shows like why it's such an important part of our identity, but it also shows how the small actions, like sometimes the small actions that we think are insignificant, are actually the thing that brings us the solutions that we need. And using that, the strategy, instead of the big power, just trying to be very smart about how we do things. And now, corn in many parts of the world is a monocrop. There is actually, instead of nourishing, which we have a way of food system, it's called milpa. Has anybody heard about milpa? I see some hands up. Milpa is kind of like agroecology, like planting in a way that respects biodiversity, that encourages biodiversity. Indigenous communities, we see ourselves as creators of biodiversity, of life, because there is this notion that, it says in the film so many times that food is medicine, but like, not only is food medicine, when there's an illness in the community, Mother Earth will bring the solution to you in the form of sacred plants and medicine. And when you have that in mind, nothing is a weed that is evil. Everything has a purpose. Everything is coming to you for a reason. And so you embrace the biodiversity. You make it work. You make it thrive. And so in indigenous communities across the world, that's why you've heard that statistic that indigenous communities protect 80% of the world's biodiversity. Not just because it was there and we're protecting it, but because we're creating it. And that can only happen when you understand the land and your hands are in the earth, which now you're seeing me with long nails, I know. But when I'm home, I promise my hands are in the earth, because that's how we grew up, so in touch with that as our identity. And so I know I'm not giving you the chance to ask me questions, but that's the power of storytelling. It's our identity, it's our culture, our tradition, our way forward. And the film talks a lot about imagination, which I would also love to touch upon, because we need a lot of that right now.
Yeah, so much creativity is needed. And I think part of what you're able to do, which is remove sort of the stigmatization of youth and having them as part of these discussions, not just as one-offs during, the annual climate change meeting, but continuously having youth part of these discussions. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the COP just happened. I'm sure you all saw that. There was some fire going around. It was really hot, really warm. Even inside the negotiation rooms, people were sweating. I don't know if any of you were there. But basically, where the people were, we couldn't even breathe because of the humidity. And in the negotiation rooms, they had the AC all on, and they were perfectly fine. actually too cold, I heard. And I think that's such a representation of where the world is at. Like, people are being left kind of forgotten and the powerful are all safe in their manufactured worlds where they're not really feeling the impacts of the climate crisis. And the youth movement has changed a lot. I know you remember us being in the streets. I was in high school when I organized my first strike. I was 17 years old. And that was 5 years ago, and now all of us are out of college, trying to find out what we're going to do with our lives. And when you have hundreds of thousands of youth coming from a youth movement, a climate movement, trying to go into even a job market, not even our worlds, right? Like a job market that is so dire and that climate funding is being taken in so many ways, and there's little funding for storytelling, and it's just a hard world that we're growing up in. So that's why we're getting together to make sure that we are there to support each other. My nonprofit, Re-Earth Initiative, does a small grants program where we have donated over $500,000 in the last 2 years to over 70 youth-led projects around the world. And that for us is incredible. Still, youth get only 0.76% of all climate funding, and climate funding in the world of philanthropy is only 1%. So we get like 1% of the 1%. And even though we're breaking down barriers and giving youth jobs in climate, it's like, I don't know how long that will last, right? And it's so important because we are the generation that's going to inherit all of the decisions today, and we need to know what it's like to start to work in a world where we are prioritizing the climate agenda because, I mean, you're seeing it here, there's no snow. People who've been here for many years and people who are from here, I keep hearing, this is unheard of. I've never seen this before, and we're seeing one of the largest snowstorms, historical ice and snowstorms in the other half of the United States. That's also because of changing weather patterns, global patterns. And so I don't think I've ever been able to say just like look outside and you'll see the climate crisis so clearly. And my generation is scared, but we also want to do everything that we can. And I think we have to change that narrative that it's like the youth movement coming. It's an intergenerational movement where we're coming together because we don't have the socio-political power, the institutional power to do much, but we have all of the energy to make sure that all of us start to think of things differently and intergenerationally. So that's, I think, why it's so important to keep including youth, supporting youth, make us part of this storytelling. And whether, this is kind of crazy, but now there's the new 16, 17-year-old organizers that see me as, more of an adult, and so having to do the passing down already.
That's great. So in this minute and a half we have left, the last time we spoke, you talked to me about The Way of the Whale, and since we are here during Sundance, I want to give you a chance to talk about it.
Yeah, thank you. So The Way of the Whale is an upcoming feature documentary that I'm working on, have been working on for the past 2 years and a half, and it's the story of gray whales from Mexico and Laguna San Ignacio to the Arctic, and following the path of gray whales to see how ship strikes are harming and killing whales. That's the reason why most of the whales died today is because of that. But also the food in the Arctic is diminishing so much that the gray whale population has decreased by 50% in the last 10 years. And so food systems is not just humans. Obviously, we need to feed 10 billion people by 2050. But it's the whole chain of beings and organisms that rely on a healthy planet as well. And whales are arriving to Mexico to breed malnourished. They're seeing less births of whales, of calves, than ever before. They're seeing whale feeding behavior for the first time in the places where they're supposed to just give birth and mate. They're only supposed to eat in the Arctic, but now whales are going in water that's only like 6 feet deep to try to get any food that they can. There's some whales that aren't migrating anymore. And so for me, the story of the whales is a reflection of our broken system. And the solutions to whale migration and protecting these areas that are also being threatened by natural gas, and we shouldn't call it natural gas, but like gas projects, are the next fight to protect the Gulf of California and other important places around the world. So for me, it's all interconnected. I know we're out of time. The last thing I'll say is on imagination, because the film talks a lot about the power of imagination. Imagining vivid, positive futures is one of the biggest solutions that we have. And in Indigenous communities, we say imagination is medicine. Challenging ourselves every day to imagine a better future gives us the path to get there. And if we don't have the stories to show us what that future could look like, it's not possible. So I invite you to imagine with us a future where we can coexist with all of living beings on Earth.
Woo! Thank you, Xiye. I think that's the perfect introduction to this film, Food 2050. So please enjoy. It's going to be great.